Hey there, D here. Today we're going over the Mythic Plus affix changes within the first season of The War Within. So, starting off with, our main change is that Blizzard got rid of all of the old affixes other than Tyrannical and Fortified, and brought in new affixes that all have to deal with the Xalatath. Um, so these could be kind of like an expansion wide affix, and they could be changing them up based off of when the new expansion comes up, or they could just rename these and keep the same effects when the new expansions come out. But we'll see, in 2 years or a year and a half when the next expansion actually comes out. Another large change is that Tyrannical and Fortified are no longer on the lowest key levels, that instead they're starting the new Xalatath bargains at level 2 instead of Tyrannical or Fortified. Alright, let's get into these Xalatath bargains. So these will last from key levels 2 up to key level 11. Um, and then they'll fall off, but we'll talk about that falling off later. So first up, we've got Xalatath's Bargain Ascendant. Every minute, Xalatath summon Orbs of Ascendance, which begin to cast Cosmic Ascension. If the orbs complete their cast, then the enemy mobs receive movement speed or haste buff per orb that gets off. But if the players stop it through any kind of interrupts or CCs, then our players get the buff instead. So this one's rather easy for most comps. You need basically only two sets of AoE CC. Um, they're, these orbs spawn in three groups, but you can get two of them together because of how they overlap in their spawns. So you really only need two sets of CC. So for example, in my group, I'll probably end-cap Roar as a Guardian Druid, and then have either the Demon Hunter or the Evoker use Chaos Nova or like a Wing Buffet. Buffet. Sorry, we call it a Wing Buffet for fun. Next up, we've got Voidbound. When the group's in combat, Xalatath periodically summons the Void Emissary, who begins to empower nearby enemy mobs with Dark Prayer. Each successful cast will grant the surrounding enemies stacking damage reduction. Upon defeating the Void Emissary, players will gain a 20-second buff, reducing cooldown rate and increasing crit. So this is the rather straightforward one. Whenever this guy is summoned, then the entire team needs to focus their DPS down on this Void Emissary and kick any cast that it's doing. That way it does not stack up damage reduction. And you can get that 20-second buff faster. And now we've got Oblivion. Whenever the group's in combat, Xalatath occasionally summons crystals that travel towards enemy targets and can be absorbed by either the enemy mobs or players themselves. If the Shattered Essence crystals hits their intended target, the mob gains a damage reduction per crystal absorbed. However, if the players soak them, then the players gain Void Essence and the entire party gains Mastery and Leech that will stack up for each orb that the players get for 20 seconds. Um, so this one's going to be pretty easy to handle for most groups. Uh, if you have like obviously a tank and then like one melee DPS, then it should be pretty easy for those two to cover most of the spread around the group to absorb most of those orbs, and especially if your ranged DPS or healer are actually helping you out by getting the ones that they can. Alright, and then we've got Devour. Xalatath periodically casts Void Rift on each group member. Void Rift is a healing absorb that can be removed by healing it off or dispelling it. This absorb lasts for 15 seconds. If it's not removed before it expires, the shield explodes, healing the enemy mobs. Uh, And if you remove the shield before it explodes, then you gain a buff called Lingering Void, which grants health and crit. Um, this is also going to be a rather easy one to deal with for most groups. This is basically Afflicted, but for players instead of having new mobs spawn. So this can be handled by any kind of dispel from any person. It can be handled by um, just healing off these heal absorbs instead. You can see down here things like Cloak of Shadows or Stone Form can take this off. Um, there's a couple classes, for example, like Evoker, that can take off 2 of these every minute because they have a Dispel and Cauterize, which is another form of Dispel. So this shouldn't be too bad as long as the DPS and or tanks are helping out with it. And so those are the 4 that are in existence from level 2 to 11. From level 4 up to level 12, I believe, we have Tyrannical and Fortified. Now, these are not new, and they haven't changed, but for anyone who doesn't know, Fortified is a buff to non-boss enemies that give them 20% more health and 20% more damage. This is what most groups tend to pull less trash together during the weeks that had Fortified. Um, at that time, the trash does a lot more damage and could really mess up your tank, or if you didn't have enough kicks to lock down those AoE casters, then this could really hurt your party. And then we've got Tyrannical, which is basically the exact opposite. Bosses have 25% more health and doesn't affect any of the trash, but their minions do have 15% increased damage as well as the bosses. And the minions are only the adds that are summoned during a boss fight. So if you pull trash into the boss, they don't get that buff. Only the boss will have it. And from 4 up to 9 key levels, you will have either Fort or Tyrannical. But then once you hit to Keystone 10, then you will constantly have both Fort and Tyrannical. So there will be a large buff in damage to both the mobs and the bosses, as well as their health. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. Alright, and then at level 7 and up, we've got the new Challenger's Peril. This is pretty simple. Basically, just every time you die, you lose 15 seconds instead of 5. I actually don't know if that's additional to the 5 you already lose, so if it would be a total of 20 seconds instead of 5. But either way, just if you're going into these keys and depleting them because of deaths, go slower. That's really the best way to handle this is if you're dying, do smaller pulls. It may feel like you're going slower, but without those extra death penalty timers, then you'll likely get through the key in time. Alright, and then we've got level 12 and up. This is where Xal'atath's Guile comes in. Xal'atath betrays the players, revoking her bargains and increasing the health and damage of enemies by 20%. So this is basically where a very large jump from regular keys for the, we'll say like slightly above average key player will begin to really experience difficulties because there will be a large jump in difficulty from the plus 11 to plus 12 because of this. Which they actually talk about this right here. So yeah, 10 and 11 will be kind of like a practice run for this, where you're having the tyrannical and fortified on all the time, and this is Zealous Asagail just puts that up to 11, basically, where everything has more health and damage, and it really stacks up as you go higher and higher. But these are the affixes. Um, Let me know what you think about them. I think this is going to be pretty cool. I'm not sure if the thought school of thought of now the plus 12s and ups are going to be very boring is going to be a correct school of thought. I feel like, at least for myself, who's barely done uh, that plus 12 level before, I feel like that would still be fun, and you don't have anything annoying to deal with at that point. That's literally just, can we survive? Can we do enough damage to get to the end? And that's what I like to deal with. I don't like having to remember that I need to run around and collect orbs or find a new mob when I already have four things that I'm trying to keep track of and kick, and now I have a new one that I need to focus and kick. I'd rather just have this damage and health increase all the time. But I've also never played with that before, so maybe I'm just coping. Well, let me know what you think of this. Let me know if you have any questions, if what else you'd like to see. This was D. Thanks for watching.